I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd miss the signs. The late nights. The hushed conversations behind closed doors. The stolen glances between my wife and the very children I once thought were mine. I was a fool. A blind, trusting fool. It all started with a whisper. Not when I heard, but when I felt. That inexplicable tightening in my chest when I walked into a room and conversation died mid-sentence. The way my son, Peter, avoided my eyes, or how my daughter, Emily, suddenly became fiercely protective of her mother's phone. A whisper can destroy a man, and this one was growing louder. That night, I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. My wife, Laura, had left for yoga, but she never came home in her workout gear anymore. No sweat on her brow. No mat in her trunk. Just the scent of a cologne I didn't wear lingering in our bedroom. I waited. Not for her, no, not this time. I waited for them. My children. Hey, kids, I said, standing in the doorway of the living room. My voice was calm, too calm, and that alone made Peter shift uncomfortably. Emily gripped the remote like it was a lifeline. Where's Mom? I asked. Peter swallowed. Yoga. Lies. Good. So she won't mind if I check her location, right? The color drained from Emily's face. Dada. I was already pulling out my phone, opening our family tracker. My heart pounded as I scrolled, knowing that whatever I found would change my life forever. There it was. Hotel Royale. Room 214. My hands went cold. Tell me, I whispered. How long? Emily bit her lip, tears pooling in her eyes. Peter looked away, jaw clenched. They had known. My own children. And they had kept her secret. The betrayal was a sharp blade, twisting deep into my ribs. The walls of my home, the home I built, felt like they were closing in. I took a deep breath and stood up. The air crackled around me. I see, I said. My voice was eerily calm, devoid of rage. Emily sobbed. Dad, please. But I was already walking away. They thought I'd break down. They thought I'd beg for explanations, scream, demand answers. No. I was done being the fool. Tomorrow, everything would change. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The walls of my bedroom, our bedroom, felt suffocating, drenched in lies and betrayal. Every memory we had built, every laugh shared, every promise whispered in the dark, all of it was meaningless now. I sat in my office, staring at the ceiling, fingers tapping on my desk as a plan formed in my mind. If they wanted to lie to me, if they wanted to make me the fool, then I would show them just how much of a fool I wasn't. At dawn, I made breakfast like I always did. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the house, a normalcy that made the tension in the air even more unbearable. Emily and Peter sat at the table, stealing nervous glances at each other. They had barely touched their food. Eat, I said, my voice void of emotion. They both flinched but obeyed. Laura walked in a moment later, hair still damp from a shower. She had the audacity to smile at me. Morning, honey. Honey. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had spent 2 decades loving, sacrificing for, building a life with, she had become a stranger in my own home. But I didn't react. Not yet. I kissed her cheek. Morning. She froze for just a second, surprised, maybe even wary, but then she sat down, sipping her coffee like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't spent the night in another man's bed. The deception was suffocating. Busy day ahead? I asked, stirring my coffee. Laura nodded. Yeah, the girls want to do a spa day. You don't mind, do you? The lie came so easily. It almost impressed me. Not at all, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. I glanced at Peter and Emily. They weren't eating anymore. They were barely breathing. They knew something was coming. Actually, I continued, I was thinking we could all take a little trip. Just the family. Laura blinked. Oh. I nodded. Yeah. Somewhere. Relaxing. A fresh start. Emily dropped her fork. Peter swallowed hard. Laura smiled, completely oblivious. That sounds nice. I smiled back. It does, doesn't it? A fresh start. That was exactly what I had in mind. By the time she left for her spa day, I had already set the wheels in motion. By the time she stepped into that hotel room again, she had no idea she was stepping into a trap. By the time she realized what I had done, it would be too late. I spent the day setting everything in motion. Revenge, when done right, is not a moment of fury. It's a slow, calculated execution. It requires patience, precision, and most importantly, a calm heart. I was calm now, colder than I had ever been. The first thing I did was visit the bank. Laura, in all her arrogance, had never taken an interest in our finances. She assumed she had access to everything, that our joint accounts meant she was entitled to half of everything I worked for. But what she never realized was that I had always prepared for the worst. My investments, my savings, everything truly valuable was in my name alone. She had access to the accounts I allowed her to see, but the real wealth, the kind that mattered, was secured under my control. The woman at the bank, a middle-aged manager with a sympathetic smile, processed my request without hesitation. My assets were moved, my accounts secured, my financial ties to Laura severed. By the time she swiped her card at the hotel tonight, she'd find nothing. Not a dime. Then came the house. I made a call to my lawyer, a ruthless man who had drawn up a prenuptial agreement years ago at my insistence. Laura had signed it without a second thought, back when she still looked at me with love, back when betrayal wasn't yet a word I associated with her name. That document was about to become the most important weapon in my arsenal. My lawyer assured me that, given the circumstances, I had every right to reclaim the home. It was mine. She was merely a guest. And soon, she wouldn't even be that. I spent the afternoon in my office, going through every document, every email, every text that proved her deceit. The evidence wasn't hard to collect. She hadn't been careful. Cheaters rarely are. They think they're untouchable until the moment they fall. I compiled everything into a folder, printed copies, and sent them where they needed to go. A copy for my lawyer. A copy for the court. And one last copy waiting on our dining table for when she walked through the door one final time. The children were next. I stood at the foot of the stairs, staring up at their doors. My own flesh and blood, my own son and daughter, had betrayed me. They had looked into my eyes and chosen her. Protected her. They weren't innocent bystanders in this. They were accomplices. I had wrestled with what to do about them, but by the time the sun had begun to set, my decision was made. I knocked on Peter's door first. It took him a moment before he opened it, and when he did, I saw the guilt swimming in his eyes. Good. He should feel guilty. Dad, he asked, his voice quiet. Pack your things, I said simply. His brow furrowed. What? I didn't repeat myself. I only stepped aside and waited. He hesitated, searching my face for something: anger, sadness, regret. He found none. Where are we going? He asked finally, but I could already see the fear growing in his expression. I'm not going anywhere, I said. You are. His face paled. Dada, I trusted you, I said, my voice even controlled. I believed in you. And when the time came, when you had the chance to do the right thing, you chose her. Dad, it's not that simple. It is that simple, I cut him off. I don't keep liars in my house. He opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded. There was no point arguing. He knew me too well. He knew there was no turning back from this. Emily was next. She was crying before I even knocked. I could hear her muffled sobs through the door. I almost felt something then. Almost. I knocked once. Dad, please, she whimpered. Please don't do this. I stepped inside, looking at her curled up on the bed, her arms wrapped around herself as if that could protect her. You protected her, I said. You lied to me. That has consequences. She shook her head violently. Mom said you'd leave her if you found out. She said it would destroy everything. I just wanted to keep us together. The words might have meant something if they had come sooner, if she had chosen me first. But she hadn't. You have an hour to pack, I said. After that, you're gone. She cried harder, but I walked away. I sat in the living room, watching the clock tick down. The house was quiet except for the distant sounds of my children moving, their shuffling footsteps, the closing of zippers. I had already made arrangements for them. They weren't going to the streets. I wasn't cruel. Their mother could have them. She had already made her choice. And now, so had I. By the time Laura returned that night, the house was still. The table was set, one final dinner, untouched. The folder lay at her place, waiting. She walked in with an easy smile, setting her purse down, stretching like she had nothing to hide. But when she saw the papers, her smile faded. What's this? She asked. I didn't answer. I let her pick it up, let her scan the documents, let the horror dawn on her face as she realized what she was looking at. Where's the money? She whispered, her voice shaking. Gone, I said. Her breathing turned ragged. The house. Mine. She flipped through the pages frantically, as if there was some loophole, some escape hidden in the ink. There wasn't. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw real fear there. Not regret. Not guilt. Just fear. You can't do this, she whispered. I already have. A car honked outside. She turned toward the door, realizing, perhaps for the first time, that this was real. "Where are the kids?" she demanded. "Waiting for you." Her hands shook as she clutched the papers. She looked around our home, my home, like she was seeing it for the last time. Because she was. Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, we can talk about this." I stood, walking to the door, holding it open for her. "Get out." She didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she picked up her bag. She walked past me, pausing in the doorway. "Is this what you want?" she whispered. I looked at her, at the woman I had given everything to, the woman who had burned it all to the ground. "No," I said, "but it's what you deserve." And with that, I closed the door. Forever. The silence was deafening. For the first time in years, the house was empty. No footsteps padding down the hallway. No distant murmurs of whispered conversations I wasn't meant to hear. No laughter. No lies. Just silence. I stood in the center of the living room, staring at nothing, feeling nothing. I thought I would feel relief, triumph, something. Instead, there was only a vast, aching emptiness. The kind that settled deep into the bones, spreading like rot. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. I walked through the house slowly, running my fingers along the walls, the furniture, the life I had built and just dismantled. The dining table where we had shared countless meals. The staircase where Peter had once tumbled down as a child, his wails echoing through the house until I scooped him up and held him close. The kitchen where Emily had stood on a stool, flour dusting her nose, helping me bake her first batch of cookies. The bedroom where I had kissed Laura goodnight 1,000 times, never realizing she had already stopped being mine. Every room was a museum of memories, frozen in time. But the people in them were gone. I had made my choice. They had made theirs. And now, I was alone. I sat down on the couch, rubbing a hand over my face, trying to push down the weight pressing against my chest. The sound of my own breathing was loud in the stillness. I had been prepared for this, for the moment they left, for the inevitable confrontation, but I hadn't been prepared for the quiet that followed. I had thought I would celebrate, pour myself a drink, sleep soundly for the first time in years. But I just sat there. The clock on the wall ticked away the minutes, each one stretching out longer than the last. Laura had begged. Not for forgiveness. No, she had never been sorry, not really. She had begged for security, for the comfort she thought she could cling to. She had pleaded, not for me, but for the life she was losing. I had seen it in her eyes. The love was gone. The regret was only for herself. Peter and Emily hadn't fought me. They hadn't screamed or protested. They had packed their bags and walked out the door. I wondered if they had done it out of guilt or if they had already chosen their mother long before today. Did they hate me? Did they resent me? Should I even care? I leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling, feeling the exhaustion creep into my bones. The adrenaline was fading, leaving nothing but the weight of it all. I had spent so much time planning this, every detail, every step. I had been so consumed with the execution, with ensuring that Laura and the kids faced the consequences of their betrayal, that I hadn't stopped to think about what would come after. What now? The thought sat heavy in my mind. I could rebuild. I had the house, the money, the freedom. I could start over, erase their presence from my life like they had never existed. I could take trips, buy new furniture, redecorate, purge every reminder of them from these walls. But some things couldn't be erased. The memories were imprinted here, in the very foundation of this place. In the scuffs on the hardwood from years of chasing giggling children. In the marks on the walls from furniture that had been moved too many times. In the warmth that had once filled this space, now replaced by an unbearable emptiness. I stood up, walking to the window. The street outside was dark, quiet. Their car was gone. They were gone. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been taken from me, too. Not the money. Not the house. Something deeper. I had always believed that loyalty was the foundation of a family. That no matter what happened, no matter how cruel the world was, the people you loved would stand by you. That was what I had fought for, what I had worked for all these years. But loyalty had meant nothing to them. I had been naive, foolish, a fool to believe that love was enough, a fool to believe that family meant forever. I turned away from the window, feeling the bitterness creep in, slow and insidious. Maybe I didn't need a family. Maybe I didn't need anyone. I walked to the kitchen, opening the cabinet where I kept the whiskey. I poured myself a glass, watching the amber liquid swirl under the dim light. I raised it to my lips, let it burn its way down. I poured another, and another. Each sip dulled the ache, numbed the thoughts, pushed away the emptiness. For tonight, that was enough. Tomorrow, I would figure out the rest. The next morning, I woke to silence. It was the kind of silence that felt unnatural, suffocating, as if the house itself was mourning the absence of its inhabitants. I lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the nothingness. For years, I had been woken by the distant sounds of life, Laura humming in the kitchen, Emily's footsteps rushing down the stairs, Peter's muffled voice from his room. Now, there was nothing. I pushed myself up, my body heavy with exhaustion. The whiskey from last night still lingered in my system, dulling the edges of my thoughts, but doing nothing to erase the reality of my situation. The house felt unfamiliar, as if I had stepped into someone else's life. The bed was too big. The air was too still. I got up, moving on autopilot, going through the motions of my morning routine. Shower. Shave. Coffee. Each step was mechanical, devoid of thought, as if pretending normalcy would somehow make it real. But there was no normal anymore. There was only this, an empty house and a hollow man standing inside it. I sat at the dining table, staring at the place where Laura had sat the night before, clutching the divorce papers with trembling hands. I could still see the shock in her eyes, the disbelief as she realized just how much she had lost. She had begged, pleaded, but in the end, she had left. They all had. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt nothing. I glanced at my phone, half expecting a message, a call, something. But there was nothing. Peter and Emily had left without a fight. They had walked out of my life without looking back. And if I was being honest, I didn't know whether I had expected them to or not. They had chosen Laura. Maybe they always had. I picked up the folder still sitting on the table, flipping through the documents I had gathered, bank statements, call logs, proof of infidelity. I had spent weeks, months, preparing for this moment, ensuring that when the time came, I would have the upper hand. And I did. So why did it feel like I had lost something too? I closed the folder and set it aside, pushing away the thoughts that threatened to creep in. I had made my choice, and there was no turning back now. Laura had betrayed me. The kids had chosen her. And I was done with all of them. The house felt different now. It wasn't just the silence, it was the absence of something more. Warmth. Familiarity. It had been my home, my refuge, but now it felt like a hollow shell, stripped of everything that had once made it whole. I stood up, grabbing my keys. I needed to get out, to breathe, to escape the suffocating weight of the emptiness pressing in on me. The streets outside were the same, indifferent to the fact that my world had just shattered. Cars passed by, people walked their dogs, life continued as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I drove without a destination, letting the road unfold before me, the hum of the engine the only sound breaking the silence. My mind kept drifting, circling back to the past, to the moments leading up to this. The lies, the betrayal, the way they had all looked at me when they realized I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. Had they expected me to forgive? To forget? I gripped the wheel tighter, my jaw clenching. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. Eventually, I found myself at the edge of town, parked in front of an old diner I hadn't been to in years. It was the kind of place that hadn't changed in decades. Red leather booths, a counter lined with stools, the faint smell of coffee and grease hanging in the air. It was comforting in a way I hadn't expected. I slid into a booth near the window, ordering a coffee without thinking. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, gave me a knowing look. "Rough day?" she asked, setting the cup down in front of me. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Something like that. She didn't pry, just nodded and walked away, leaving me to my thoughts. I stared into the black liquid, watching the steam rise, losing myself in the swirl of memories that wouldn't leave me alone. I thought about Laura, about the way she used to look at me, before everything changed. Before the lies, before the betrayal. Had it all been a lie? Had she ever truly loved me, or had she just loved the life I had given her? I thought about Peter and Emily. About the nights I had stayed up with them when they were sick, the birthdays, the laughter, the moments that had once felt unbreakable. Had they ever truly seen me as their father, or was I just the man who had provided for them? A bitter taste settled on my tongue, stronger than the coffee. It didn't matter anymore. They were gone, and I wasn't going to chase them. I finished my coffee and left a few bills on the table, nodding at the waitress as I walked out. The air was crisp, the sky overcast, the kind of day that felt suspended between storms. As I got back into my car, I realized something. I had spent so long planning for this moment, so long preparing for their betrayal, for the reckoning that had finally come, that I hadn't considered what came next. The revenge was over. The house was mine. The money was secured. They were gone. Now what? I had no answer. I drove back home, stepping inside the silent house, feeling its emptiness wrap around me like a ghost. I walked through the rooms, past the remnants of a life that no longer existed, past the echoes of laughter that would never return. I stopped in the doorway of Peter's room. His shelves were empty, his posters still pinned to the walls. It looked abandoned, like a place frozen in time. I stepped inside, running my fingers over the desk, the surface smooth and familiar. This had been his space, his world. And now, it was just another empty room. I didn't know what I had expected. I had wanted them gone. And now they were. I turned off the light and shut the door behind me. Maybe it would be easier tomorrow. Maybe the silence would feel less suffocating. Or maybe it would never go away. Maybe I had won. But maybe, just maybe, I had also lost. Days passed. Maybe weeks. Time blurred into an endless cycle of silence, coffee, and empty thoughts. I moved through the house like a ghost, every step echoing through the hollow rooms. I had won. Laura was gone. The kids were gone. The house was mine. The money was mine. But nothing felt like mine anymore. I kept waiting for something. Anger, regret, relief. But all I found was an unbearable quiet. No calls. No messages. Not from Laura, not from Peter, not from Emily. It was as if they had erased me as completely as I had erased them. And maybe that was fair. I spent the mornings walking through the house, touching things that no longer held meaning. The picture frames on the wall, the furniture we had picked out together, the small marks on the doorframe where I had measured Peter and Emily's heights every year. They had been part of me, my reason for working late, for coming home early, for building something bigger than myself. Now I had no one to share it with. One night, I found myself standing in the doorway of Emily's old room. It was exactly as she had left it, neat, organized, but empty. Her books were still on the shelves, her blankets still tucked perfectly on her bed, but the life had been sucked out of it. I stepped inside, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the walls. Had I been too harsh? Had I cut them out too easily? No. They had betrayed me. They had lied to my face, protected Laura, let me be the fool. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost more than I had gained. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, staring at the walls, wondering if silence was the only thing I had left. I thought I would never see her again. I had convinced myself that Laura was gone forever, that she had slithered off into whatever pathetic life she had left for herself. But I was wrong. She showed up one evening, standing at the front door like she had the right to be there. I opened it, my face blank, my heart cold. "What do you want?" I asked. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her once perfect posture slumped under some invisible weight. I should have felt satisfaction seeing her like that. But all I felt was an old exhaustion creeping in. I wanted to talk," she said quietly. I let out a hollow laugh. "Talk. Now you want to talk." She flinched, but didn't back down. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know what I did. But I didn't come to beg. I just wanted to see you. To see if you're okay." I stared at her, trying to understand if this was some cruel joke. After everything she had done, she wanted to know if I was okay? "I'm fine," I said. "You can go now." Her eyes flickered with something. Pain. Maybe. Regret. But regret couldn't rewrite the past. "Where are the kids?" I asked before she could turn away. She hesitated. "Peter's staying with me." "Emily?" "She's been distant. I think she blames herself." I scoffed. "Good. She should." Laura exhaled, shaking her head. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to break our family." I stepped closer, lowering my voice to something cold, sharp. "You didn't break our family. You destroyed it." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. Not anymore. She swallowed hard. "I'll go. I just take care of yourself, okay?" I didn't answer. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the night like a ghost. I shut the door, locking it behind her. She had no place here anymore. The days stretched longer. The nights felt endless. I never called Peter. I never called Emily. And they never called me. There was a part of me that wanted to reach out, to see if there was anything left to salvage. But I didn't. They had chosen their side. They had walked away without hesitation. Maybe they never really loved me. Maybe I had been nothing more than a provider, a figure who paid the bills, a man who was easy to discard. Or maybe I had made a mistake. I drowned the thought in whiskey. Some wounds were better left to rot. It was late when the message came. A simple text. "Dad." Please talk to me. Emily. I stared at the screen. My heart a storm of emotions I didn't want to feel. I could ignore it. I could delete it. I could pretend she didn't exist anymore. But my fingers moved on their own. Why now? I typed back. The response came almost instantly. Because I miss you. And because I was wrong. I put the phone down, running a hand over my face. Was this real? Or was it just another lie? I didn't sleep that night, staring at the phone, waiting for the courage to decide. I met her at the diner. She looked smaller than I remembered, her once bright eyes filled with hesitation. I didn't know what to expect, but I let her sit across from me. I don't blame you for hating me, she said softly. I didn't respond. I just watched her, waiting. I was scared, she continued. Mom made it sound like you'd leave us if you found out. I thought I was protecting something. I thought I was doing the right thing. I let out a slow breath, gripping my coffee cup. And now? She looked down, then back at me. And now, I know I was wrong. I should have told you. I should have chosen you. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but her voice broke slightly. I just wanted you to know. For a long moment, I said nothing. She had hurt me, more than she even understood. But looking at her now, I saw the girl I had raised. The daughter who used to climb into my lap when she had nightmares. The child who once believed I was the strongest man in the world. The past couldn't be undone. But maybe the future could still be written. I sighed, pushing a napkin toward her. Eat something. You look like you haven't had a decent meal in weeks. A small, hopeful smile tugged at her lips. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something crack inside me. Maybe hate wasn't all I had left. Maybe there was still something worth saving. Maybe, just maybe, forgiveness wasn't as impossible as I had once believed.